fast, now that I've embarrassed you enough. So is there anywhere on this graph where both goods are inferior? Right? Where would that be? Right down here, okay, in that zone. Let's highlight that zone. Let's highlight that zone in my least favorite color. I just don't like that color because it doesn't show up well on PowerPoint slides. Actually, shows up okay on the projector. So in this zone, we're consuming fewer Hershey's, fewer Reese's, right? So what I'm saying is, why would you never land down here? You would never land down here because there is no indifference curve that makes you better off than your original consumption bundle and is somehow on the new budget constraint. So the only indifference curve you could really draw, and now this picture is going to get really messy, that gets you down here somewhere, right, is something like this. But on this indifference curve, you're worse off, right? So you wouldn't consume that. You'd stick with your original indifference curve, or even better, with the new income level, you'll move out here somewhere and make yourself better off than before. There's no indifference curve in this two-good world right here, where you would choose less of both goods now that you have more income. You've got to spend it on something. So you've got to spend more on one good. Now, the way to walk away from this is not to say that all goods have to be normal. The way to walk away from this is to say that at least one good in your consumption world has to be normal, right? You have to spend money if you get more money on something. So not all goods can be inferior. As you get more money, you spending less, consuming less of everything, holding prices constant is sort of a strange thing. The money has to go somewhere. That something good could be savings, right? Savings is a good, right? Stashing money into your sock and then putting that into your closet somewhere, that's great. That's a good, right? You spend it on something. So maybe the only normal thing you've got is savings, right? And that's totally fine. You're not spending any money on anything else. But the money has to go somewhere in this model. So the takeaway lesson here is both goods could be normal. Reese's could be inferior. Reese's could be normal. Hershey's inferior, or Reese's inferior and Hershey's normal. But not both goods can be inferior ever. So not all goods in your consumption bundle can be inferior. At least one good has to be normal. Excellent question. So I've summarized because what always happens here is that I get lost in the beauty of angle curves, and here's what happens. Right. So a normal good. This is a summary slide. As your income goes up, you want more of it, right? Or the equivalent thing to say is your angle curve is upward sloping. As income goes up, you consume more of it. Those statements are interchangeable. Most goods are normal. As you get more money, you want weekly more of it, either the same amount or more of it, right? There are some goods that are inferior, right? As your income goes up, you want less of it. That means your angle curve is downward sloping. Those two statements are interchangeable. Things like that are mac and cheese and cups of noodles. Right now, unless you're gluten intolerant, you're eating a lot of mac and cheese. Why? It's cheap, it's delicious, and I don't know any other reason. Oh yeah, I know the important reason. You're poor, right? You have no money. You're spending all your money on what you should be spending your money on, which is school. So the point here is there are some goods that you consume because your income is low and they're probably relatively cheap, but as your incomes go up, you consume less of them. That's mac and cheese. Once you become a famous rich person that's being driven around in a Rolls Royce, are you just never going to eat mac and cheese again? No way. When nobody's looking, you're sneaking into your fancy kitchen overlooking all of Manhattan, and you're putting that powder into the water or milk. Put a little bit of butter in because that just makes it better, right? You're going to take the noodles and you're going to sit somewhere in a quiet corner and eat your mac and cheese because it's good, right? But you're going to eat it less frequently than you did before. You're going to stick with the truffle tagliatelle made by Mario Batali, maybe. Giffen good is a weird good, right? We'll talk about this. Somebody kept on saying it's a Geffen good. We're not talking about David Geffen here or Geffen Records or anything like that. This is a Giffen good, different thing. As the price of a good rises, you want more of it. One good, right? Not different types of goods. We talked about this in the beginning here. As something becomes more expensive, you want to consume more of it. There is some evidence in the art world where sort of no-name artists all of a sudden start pricing their works at outrageous prices, and all of a sudden people want to buy it because it's now expensive, hence it must be good. There are problems with that story, but we could talk about that one. There are very few goods, almost none of them. Some people argue that high-priced steak, like the steak you get at, I've never been to, Morton's is like one of those places where you get a piece of meat and a potato for $60. The story here is imperfect, too, because it's not the same steak you get at Applebee's, right? It comes from a cow that's had therapy, got massages, it ate, like, organic yogurt for breakfast, speaks 6 languages. So it's not the same steak, right? It's different steak, or at least you're told that's the case. So I don't really believe that steak is a pure Giffen good either, but we could have more discussions about it. Undergrads historically have obsessed about Giffen goods because I'm obsessed with them. They're totally irrelevant because they mostly don't exist. They're nice things to talk about and think about, but really the action is with normal and inferior goods, not with Giffen goods. Does this mean I won't upset you with questions about Giffen goods? Of course not. We're going to talk about Giffen goods. Okay. So some goods can be inferior and normal. What do you mean, Max? Well, let's talk about that for a second. Where are you? Here's my pretty graph. All right. So let's pick that example. I really like that question. Max, I'm unhappy with Hershey's and Reese's as the two representative goods. That's not cool, right? This is all carbs all the time. Okay, so mac and cheese, here we come. Because mac and cheese are a well-balanced meal, right? Carbs and fats. What's this now? I can have 2 different, wow. There are 2 possible pens. I don't have to click through. Okay, I learned something. Everything else, let's do this what we did earlier. And mac and cheese. So let's go with 4-4 as a possible budget constraint. Then I'm going to come up with another budget constraint, which is 6-6. And another budget constraint, which is 9-9. Which is like the world's most annoying commercial ever. 9! All right, so let's look at a very weird individual. Let's look at your instructor, all right? Your instructors' indifference curves look as follows. And not everybody's indifference curves look like this. My indifference curves look something like this. Yeah. Okay, that's indifference curve 1. So at the low budget amount, I'm consuming about 2 boxes of mac and cheese a day. That's about right. Then my income goes up a little, and I'm a big guy. I'm hungry. So in school, my income went up a little bit. Grandma sends you some money. I'm going to increase my consumption of mac and cheese, right? If you're so poor, textbooks are so expensive, you're getting by on a box of mac and cheese a day. If somebody sends you some extra money, you might eat 2 boxes of mac and cheese a day because you're hungry. So here we go. Now you start working at a job. You get much more income. Instead of the 40 bucks a week you've got to eat, you've all of a sudden got 80 bucks a week, all right? What happens? Chipotle happens. Okay? So what we've got here, this is M1, M2, M3. right? So you start out really poor, you're hungry, you get a little bit more money, you're going to eat more mac and cheese because it's cheap, right? And it's something you're going to spend money on. And all of a sudden your income doubles and you're going to ramp back the mac and cheese consumption and you're going to go to Chipotle more often and eat more Chipotle, which isn't everything else. So what happened here, right? For the first increase in income, you went from M1 to M2, right? Income went up, you consumed more. But then as income went up again to the third budget constraint, what happened to your consumption of mac and cheese? It went down, right? So what happened here is at the first increase in income, your consumption of mac and cheese went up, meaning mac and cheese is normal for that change in income. But then as income changed again, all of a sudden your consumption of mac and cheese went down and mac and cheese is inferior. So mac and cheese doesn't have to be normal to you over all income ranges. It doesn't have to be inferior to you over all income ranges. It could be at low levels of income normal and then at high levels of income inferior. Now here comes the fun part. What does the angle curve look like for something like this? Income, mac and cheese. All right. So let's say the low level of income is $2. Okay, so let's call this Y1. The second level of income, let's call that $4. And the last level of income, $8. So let's do the same thing, right? Let's figure out what the angle curve looks like at these three levels of income. 2, 4, 8. So let's just drop down the M1 here. So that's the low level of income. That's my consumption of mac and cheese at $2 of income. At $4 of income, I'm consuming M2 units of mac and cheese right here. And at the highest level of income, I'm now consuming M3 units of mac and cheese. So if I did this over and over again, I get a weird backward bending angle curve. Let's go crazy here and draw this in all red. Okay, that's what my angle curve looks like. If I hit this part here, I don't know how I can do that. Okay, so if we hide the top part here, it looks like an upward sloping angle curve, normal good, up until income levels of roughly $4 or $5. If we hide the bottom part, the angle curve is downward sloping, so it's an inferior good for incomes above roughly, $4.50 or something like that. So this is an example for an individual for whom mac and cheese is both an inferior and a normal good. At low levels of income, normal. At high levels of income, inferior. Why am I bugging you with this? Well, it explains behavior pretty well. But this actual picture here gave rise to a really, really important labor market phenomenon that we'll study, namely how people respond to tax cuts in terms of their number of hours worked per day. So we're going to look at that, and that has huge implications for tax policy. So if this is actually right here, and the good we're talking about here is hours of leisure, this really has consequences for how many hours people work in response to tax cuts or tax increases, which will be pretty exciting. Okay. Now I'm going to introduce something difficult, all right? This is hard. And we'll do this in the last 7 minutes of class, and I'll do it again at the beginning of next class. But this way you can start freaking out before Tuesday, and hopefully that'll help you read over the weekend. So let's think for a second again about price changes, not income changes. We're done with income changes for now. What if the price of a good changes? So as the price of a good rises, if we wanted to sketch that for a second, right? So draw two axes here. What kind of weird pen is that? Two axes, right? So Reese's and Hershey's. So if this is your initial budget constraint, if the price now goes up of Hershey's, what happens to your budget constraint? Does the intercept change? The answer should be an enthusiastic no, right? Because the price of Reese's is the same. Does the intercept on the x-axis change? I want to hear more yeses than that. Yes, all right. Yeah, Max, you're annoying. Okay. But here's what happens, right? The budget constraint rotates in. So what happens to the slope of my budget constraint? Is the marginal rate of transformation the same? No, right? So you're facing a new marginal rate of transformation. It says that in bold right next to it. But what also happens, right? Your nominal income stayed the same, meaning the number of dollars you have in your pocket. The price of Reese's stayed the same, but the price of a good you consume went up. So what that means is that rise in price of Hershey's doesn't just affect the relative ratio of prices that you face, the rate at which the store lets you trade or convert Reese's into Hershey's, but what happened to your opportunity set? Shrinks, right? You have a much smaller triangle now opportunity set available to you than you did before. So if your nominal income stays the same, and one of the prices increases, and all other prices stay the same, not only are you facing new relative prices, but you have a real income effect, right? Because the price now, because of this higher price, the set of bundles you can afford is much, much smaller because one price went up and your nominal income stayed the same, and the other goods price didn't drop to make up for it, right? So there's two things that happen. You face new relative prices, the exchange rate between the two goods changed, plus your real income is lower, right? So new marginal rate of transformation, less real income. So now what economists have done, this is one of the many things that has made us tremendously unpopular with undergraduate students across the world. I mean, it's just one of them. The list is like 10,000 units long. But what I want you to do, and what every economist ever wants you to do, in your mind, break down your behavioral response to a price change into two effects. Right? I'm going to break down the fact that your consumption of Hershey's and Reese's changes because of the price effect into two things. One is going to be this effect that you're reacting that there's now a new exchange rate here. Right? Your ability to exchange Reese's for more Hershey's has changed because the store changed prices, and the impacts of this real income shock that you have less real money available because that price changed. Now, I want to be clear. What I'm about to do graphically has nothing whatsoever to do with the real world that you could ever observe. All right? You can't observe this. The only thing you ever observe is if you have people face different prices, I can see how you change your ultimate consumption bundle. Before, you consumed 2 Reese's, 2 Hershey's. Now the price of Hershey's goes up. Maybe you consume 2.3 Reese's and 1 Hershey's. So I can compare the two bundle. But this breaking this down in the impact, this overall change in consumption into a substitution effect and an income effect is something that only happens in the mind of economists and students in the classroom. So the substitution effect is this behavior that consumers substitute away from the relatively more expensive good. This will always happen. Right? So the substitution effect itself is going to run the following experiment in your mind. If we held your level of happiness constant at your initial consumption bundle, right? So you have your initial level of income and your initial set of prices. What's your level of utility at that utility maximizing bundle? You close your eyes and you record that level of utility, okay? Then I'm going to make you run an experiment in your head. I'm going to keep my eyes closed because I need to run this and this is tricky, all right? So what you need to do is I want you to figure out on that indifference curve, at that level of happiness, hold that constant, where on that indifference curve would you consume, ignore the fact that the money you need under the new prices changes, right? If you face the new price ratio. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold utility constant, we're going to restrict ourselves to remain on the original indifference curves, but we're going to see where on that indifference curve would we consume if we were to face the new price ratio. So we're going to somehow migrate along the indifference curve until we get to a point where the slope of the indifference curve is the same as the new price ratio, right? The issue there is can we afford that new bundle or not? Most likely not if we're talking about a price increase, but I want you to ignore that. Then, what the income effect is going to do, there's a little voice in the back of your head that says, well, Max, now that you've migrated along the indifference curve, great, but price went up, your nominal income stayed the same, you can't afford that bundle. So what I'm going to do is I want you to figure out, if I actually reflect the amount of real income you have, what's the ultimate consumption bundle you're going to consume. So I'm going to somehow pull back from that fictitious new consumption bundle on the old indifference curve to one that I can actually afford. Now, you're already thinking that kind of made about 9% sense to me. It sounded intelligent, right? But not quite getting it. So what I would really ask you to do, because this is hard, this will be on the midterm, is over the weekend, pull out a nice hot cup of tea, get your textbook, and read the part in your textbook on income and substitution effects. If it doesn't make a lot of sense, I'm going to explain it to you again on Tuesday, but if you come in here cold on Tuesday, you're going to freeze, okay? So I will see you again on Tuesday, and we're going to do this income and substitution effect thing in great detail.